Before we begin, remember this: evil doesn't always look evil. Sometimes it looks completely ordinary. He fixed your car, he sat in the church beside you, he smiled at your children, and when the police finally dug up his garden, they found two teenager girls buried beneath a child's toy. Peter Tobin was the most dangerous kind of evil, the kind that looks completely ordinary. If true crime stories like this one keep you up at night, the kind where the monster was hiding in plain sight the whole time, hit that subscribe button right now, like this video, drop a comment below, and stay with me, because this story gets darker before it ever gets to justice. Part 1. The boy nobody wanted to believe. Johnstone, Scotland, 1946. A boy is born into a working class family, and for a while he looks like any other child growing up in post-war Britain. His name is Peter Tobin, and almost nothing about his early years would give you pause, unless you knew where to look. By the time Peter was a teenager, the warnings were already there. He was aggressive in ways that went beyond ordinary childhood frustration. There was something cold behind his eyes, something that didn't respond to empathy or consequence the way other children did. Some authorities flagged him. Social workers intervened. He was eventually sent to a reform school, which in those days meant little more than warehousing troubled boys until they were old enough to disappear back into society. And disappear he did. He drifted, he worked odd jobs, handyman work, mechanical repairs, the kind of labour that takes you in and out of people's homes and garages and lives. He learned how to seem helpful, how to seem trustworthy, how to make himself invisible in the best possible way. By the time he moved to Brighton, around 1970, he had perfected the performance. He married a woman named Margaret Monterey, and for a brief moment, the mask held. But masks always slip. Behind closed doors, the man Margaret had married revealed himself to be something entirely different. He tortured her. He raped her. He left her with injuries so severe she required serious medical attention. And before that, in what seemed like an almost symbolic act of what was to come, he killed their dog. Margaret survived. She got out. But the world didn't yet understand what she had survived. And Peter Tobin, charming, church-going, helpful Peter Tobin, simply moved on. He always moved on. Part 2. The Girls in the Garden. February 10th, 1991. The air is cold in Bathgate, Scotland. 15-year-old Vicky Hamilton is standing at a bus stop waiting. She had places to be. She has a whole life ahead of her. She is a teenager in the most ordinary, beautiful sense, impatient, hopeful, unaware that the most dangerous thing she could ever encounter was a man who looked like someone's dad. Peter Tobin pulled up, offered a ride, or struck up a conversation. The exact method barely mattered, because predators like Peter Tobin had spent decades perfecting their approach. Vicky got into his car, or went with him somehow, and she was never seen alive again. What Peter did to Vicky Hamilton in the hours that followed is almost impossible to put into words. He raped her, he tortured her, he murdered her, and then in an act of calculated, methodical evil that speaks to just how cold this man truly was, he cut her body into 2 pieces, wrapped the remains in plastic bags and buried them in the garden of his home. And then he went back inside. That same year, 18-year-old Dina McNichol was hitchhiking. She was a music festival goer, a free spirit, a young woman living the kind of carefree life that feels invincible at 18. Peter Tobin offered her a lift. She accepted. She never arrived at her destination. Peter murdered Dina too. And then he did something that reveals the full depth of his calculated monstrosity. He dug a hole beneath his young son's outdoor toys and he buried both girls there, Vicky Hamilton and Dina McNichol, side by side, hidden beneath the innocence of a child's playthings. His son played above them every single day. For 15 years, those girls laid undiscovered. Their families grieved without answer. Their mothers and fathers grew older, carrying a grief that had no closure, no grave to visit, no truth to hold on to. And Peter Tobin simply moved, changed addresses, changed names when needed, and kept going. Part 3. Survived, but scared. 2 years later, in 1993, Peter Tobbins was living in Hampshire. 2 young girls, both 14 years old, were caught in the rain one evening. In the way that young people sometimes do, they knocked on the nearest door asking for shelter. Peter Tobin answered. What followed was a nightmare. He forced them inside. He drugged them, rendering them helpless. He raped and tortured both girls, and he did it all in front of his 4-year-old son, who was present in the home. Let that settle for a moment. He did not hide. He did not even try to shield his own child from what he was doing, because to Peter Tobin, other human beings, whether they were the girls he victimized, his own son, or anyone else, were simply objects in the landscape of his own desires. When he had finished, he turned on the gas stove and left the room, intending for both girls to die from the fumes. He walked outside, locked the door, and left 2 14-year-olds unconscious in a gas-filled room. But they survived. They woke up, they got out, they reported what had happened, and for the first time in Peter Tobin's long history of violence, the police were actively looking for him. He fled, he changed his name, he hid in plain sight, the only thing he had ever truly been good at. He was eventually found outside a church of all places, using a false identity. He was arrested, charged, and convicted of the 1993 rapes. He served a 9-year sentence and was released in 2004. Released back into the world, back into the churches and communities and unsuspecting lives. Part 4. The Church and the Last Victim. September 24, 2006, Glasgow, Patrick's Church, Anderston. 20-year-old Angelica Clark was a Polish student studying in Scotland. She was bright and hardworking, volunteering and working at the church to support herself. She had a future. She had people who loved her. Peter Tobin had recently been working at the church as a handyman, a role that gave him access, proximity, and the veneer of trustworthiness that he had always exploited. On that September day, he attacked Angelica. What he did to her was savage and prolonged. He raped her, beat her with extreme violence, and murdered her. And then, with the methodical coldness that defined everything he had ever done, he hid her body beneath the floorboards of a secret space in the church's basement, concealed beneath a confessional. In a church, beneath a confessional. When Angelica's disappearance was reported and a body was eventually discovered, the horror of what had been done to her shook the entire country. Police released a description and image of a man seen near the church. A neighbour came forward immediately. "I know that man," the neighbour said. "He used to live near here. His name is Peter Tobin." Within days, police tracked him to a hotel in Paisley. He was using a false name. He was always using a false name. But this time, there was nowhere left to run. He was arrested, charged with Angelica's murder, and the full machinery of the British justice system finally turned its full attention onto the man behind the face. And then came the digging. When investigators began looking into Peter Tobin's previous addresses, they dug up the garden of his former home in Margate, Kent. They found Vicky Hamilton and Dina McNichol, 2 girls who had been missing for 15 years, 2 families who had never stopped hoping. The ground gave up his secrets one by one. Peter Tobbins was convicted of Angelica Clark's murder in 2007, then Vicky Hamilton's in 2008, then Dina McNichol's in 2009. 3 separate trials, 3 life sentences, and finally, the sentence that confirmed the justice of it all: a whole life order. In British law, a whole life order means exactly what it sounds like. No parole, no review, no release. Peter Tobbins would die inside a prison cell. The law looked at what he had done, looked at who he was, and drew a hard, permanent line. He would never walk free again. For the families of Vicky, Dina, and Angelica, there is no such thing as complete closure. There is no verdict that returns a daughter, a sister, a friend, but there is something